Morning, glory, and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Hope you are having a great Friday. Ben Domenech is with us, editor-at-large for The Spectator. Got his own podcast over at Fox News. He's a Fox News contributor. Ben, I know you're a Washington Commanders fan. Are you also a Washington Nationals fan? Are you a baseball guy?
I was there yesterday for opening day.
Okay, so I don't know who calls the national game.
In fact, I also have tickets this entire season. I got one of their packages to have standing room only tickets to every single game.
Oh, you are
so
you are a
that
true
means
fan.
That I can go straight from special report to the game if need be.
You are a true fan. Who calls their game? I'm a Guardians fan, so my entire life it's either been Herb Score or Tom Hamilton. They're the voice of baseball in my ear. But who is the voice of Washington Nationals baseball?
Well, so we actually are undergoing a transition right now because we had someone who had been calling the games for quite some time and then passed away. So unfortunately, but look, I actually go to the games, so I don't listen to the radio.
Really? All right. Well, I've got a special treat for the audience, of which you're going to be a part. I've been doing this a long time. I've probably done, I calculate, close to 30,000 interviews, not counting callers. This is my favorite interview of all time. I'm just going to play you 2.5 minutes from April 2012, cut number 17.
Oh, we had nuns, sisters of charity, and I might bore you with a little story.
Please.
There were times when they were not too charitable to this red-headed kid, and the reason was that I was very, very left-handed. And every time I would use my left hand, the good nun would hit me across the back of the knuckles with the flat of the ruler. And if I insisted upon using my left hand, occasionally she would turn the ruler so that she would hit me with the edge of the ruler, which broke the skin. And one night at dinner, passing the bread or whatever, my mother saw this cut-up hand, and she assumed that I had been punished for talking in class or whatever, and she would have been correct 99% of the time. But in this instance, I explained, no, it's because I'm using my left hand. Well, our family doctor, and I only use this because it works out very well, our family doctor was Jewish, and he sat down and wrote a letter to the Catholic nuns. And in the letter, he explained, among other things, that if you force this little boy to become right-handed, it might very well cause him to stutter, which would have changed my life dramatically. And then the last line of the letter, it said, and besides, dear sisters, why in the world would you want to change God's work?
Wow.
Well, we hit a grand slam with that line, and they allowed me to stay left-handed. And I was very, very familiar, long before the movie, with King George in England, who stuttered. I bet I read a book about him because I was left-handed maybe 40 years ago. And the reason he stuttered was because he was basically and originally left-handed, and they made him right-handed. And from that book and from that story, they made the beautiful movie, The King's Speech.
Yes.
But they only alluded to the fact that he was left-handed, forced to be right-handed, in one quick throwaway line. But I really understood and was very empathetic to the king.
So, Ben Domenech, Vin Scully, the greatest of all time.
Can I share you my favorite
Please.
line?
I was hoping it would elicit one.
He was. There was a game. I can't actually remember who it was he was commenting on at the time, but a player came out having some particularly bushy sideburns, and his comment. Just, he made everything sound so easy. What ho, what men are these with sideburns like parentheses?
Oh! Do you know?
Oh my God! He once referred to a fly ball catch like catching a chick falling out of a tree.
Oh.
it's a guy. I mean, the fact that he had the capability to make incredible moments awesome by waiting for the moment and then commenting with something perfect. It's a skill that I lack, Hugh, but it's one that I absolutely respect. One of the great memories of my life are tied to listening to some of these men over the years call these games. And I envy so much that skill. It's such an incredible one, and to have the right word for the right moment. It's, as Twain tells us, the difference between lightning and the lightning bug.
I'm going to attach that entire interview to our podcast from 2012 at the end of today's Big Weekend podcast.
I will tell you one person you should have on. If you do not have him in your regular rotation, Hugh, you should reach out to my good friend Bill James.
Oh,
who is a phenomenal interview. If you've not talked to him before,
I have not.
And his recollection for history around the game is so phenomenal that I never come away from any conversation with him without learning something.
Now, I brought it up today, not just because baseball is upon us, but because this morning I was reflecting on the fact that Cleveland fans, the sports gods do not smile on us, but we have been blessed with extraordinary sports writers. And I think sports journalism today has a lot to teach political journalism about objectivity, analytics, and how to do their job.
Funny you should say that, because I actually use that in a comparison that I make when I give speeches before audiences relative to young journalists who are coming up about the differences between these things, and that they should have that they should be more in common.
Yes.
Than the way they currently are. But please continue.
Well, I want you to expand on the NPR chief this week. Represents to me all that's gone wrong with media, and the Republicans had better sure as hell defund NPR, CPB, or NPBS, and maybe NEA and NEH, because they're beyond reclamation. They're just ideologically lost. And I don't know when that happened to journalism, but sports journalism, it hasn't happened, because they're still giving us the sports, the scores, the analytics. They're telling us who's doing well. Sports podcasting is amazing. The old journalism could go to school on new sports journalism.
I completely agree. And in fact, I would take it a step further and say that, one of the things that really has impressed me in this past decade is that sports podcasting has been so far ahead of political podcasting, meaning that and this is one of the things that I think is so important. It is important to remember that the audience is smarter than you think they are, or than the producers think they are. Talk to your audience not as if they are dumb, but to raise them up to the level where you believe they truly are at. And who is that? To me, that's the smartest sports fan in the bar. It's the guy who's sitting at the bar, who knows the team, knows the players, knows more than the friend group around him, okay, but is also an everyman, meaning that he has other priorities in his day. We should talk that way when we talk about politics. And yet, instead, what do we have? We have people who cater to the lowest common denominator, who have this fictional idea of someone who's an idiot out there, who doesn't know the way things work in politics. And yet, we have this running 24 hours a day coverage that happens where, I just think, unfortunately, it's really low quality, because we don't appreciate and respect the viewer of politics the way that we would a sports fan.
I agree.
Who will identify a
that's
bad
profound.
take in an instant.
Let me talk about the exception to that rule. Brett Baer, our friend, he talked to Elon Musk last night as though the audience was smart, and Elon Musk delivered. Did you watch that interview?
That interview is one of the most interesting interviews that I have seen on cable news in the last decade. It's so incredibly interesting. There's so much that comes out of it. And look, I think that, people, they'll get after us for sucking up to him and that kind of thing. I think Brett Baer's the last great newsman.
I think he's America's newsman now.
I think he's America's newsman, and the fact that he approaches the job that is incredibly difficult. I will say this, like, people act like this is easy. It's not. It's very hard, and you're juggling a lot of different things. And to go into something like that and to have the level of questioning that he did, I think was really impressive. And what we got out of it, I was laughing throughout it, because Elon kept, having zingers and that type of thing. He came ready to play. But, going into something like that, it's very easy to botch that. And if you botch it, nobody remembers it. They just say, whatever. But if you have something that comes out of it as interesting as that, that's the kind of thing that we're going to go back to and look at in the future, that you could assign tomorrow in whether you're in a poli-sci class or, something like that, to look at the different things that are going on in our government right now. And look, I'm very optimistic about this project. It's the first time that we actually have someone doing the work of fiscal conservatism within this government and asking the questions that need to be asked about the things that we're doing. And from my perspective, there's a direct line back to the Tea Party days and when we actually had people who said, look, we keep asking Washington to cut, and they keep saying there's no waste.
That's right. And Elon Musk has got the skill set and the staff to get it done. I'm coming back with Ben during the break. Don't go anywhere, America. It'll all be on the podcast, including the entire Vin Scully interview. Can't play for you the Elon Musk interview. You're going to have to find that at foxnews.com. Stay tuned. I'm back with Ben Domenech. Ben, as I was telling Matt Continenty earlier, this week I received Fight by John Allen and Amy Parnt, and I cannot discuss the particulars. It's embargoed until Tuesday. I can say, generally, I'm shocked. I'm absolutely mortified by what I'm reading. This is the first mover, so they have the first mover advantage. What do you think is going to be the end result of all the books about the last half of the Biden presidency?
I think the result is going to be an indictment of the journalistic class at large, and I think that you're also going to have an indictment of those within the Democratic Party who I think knew far earlier than the rest of us, particularly the donor class, that this was going on. And it's a sad indictment. And I want to be clear about this because it's easy as someone who does not share their ideology to kind of make light of this or to be joyful about this. And I am not joyful at all. I want a president who's competent regardless of what party he's in. I want a president who is aware of what's going on around him, regardless of what he's going to do with that knowledge. I don't want a president who is essentially, in the same position as Woodrow Wilson. And yet that looks increasingly like what we had without realizing it. And there's so many decisions that were made in the last, year, months of the Biden administration that have enormous consequences. And look, I have respect for people on the other side. I'm friends with many of them, as you know. I'm friends with people who are in the kind of, technocrat, Democrat lane, because we're at loggerheads over Obamacare, and we came through that, and they got the best of that situation. But I think my critiques were well met and were vindicated ultimately in a lot of ways. But the point is, I respect them because I don't think that they're people who are bad people who have anti-American interests at heart. If you were an anti-American, what would you rather have than the last year of the Joe Biden presidency?
Yeah, and to go back to what we were talking about, any sports journalist would have said about any athlete they were covering, not only has he lost his fastball, and not only can he not hit, he's gone Steve Sachs. He can't throw it to first base anymore. They would have told the truth. It's an indictment, and I'm not going to say anything about what's in Fight, but it's an indictment of everybody who was close to the guy, every single person.
There's a great line from John Updike talking actually about, a situation with the New Yorker editor where he said, the job of an editor is to help a writer when he's lost his fastball. And to me, this is a situation where you can't afford to have someone who has completely lost not just their fastball, not just their curveball, not just their splitter, but any ability to actually function on the mound. And that, to me, is something that it's unacceptable. We live in an age of risk. We can't afford to have a president that's asleep at the wheel. Yeah,
you're being generous. It lost the ability to find the mound. I'll be right back with Ben Domenech about the most serious thing of the day and maybe the weekend. Our B2s parked at Diego Garcia. Stand by. Welcome back, America. The most important story of the week, which has gotten almost no coverage until Donald Trump spoke at the White House today, is what he said, and the backdrop to it are 7 B2s parked at Diego Garcia that weren't there a week ago. Here's cut number 15, President Trump at the White House.
On my list of things to watch, and as you probably know, I sent them a letter just recently, and I said, you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other, and we're going to either have to talk it out, or very bad things are going to happen to Iran, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. My big preference, and I don't say this through strength or weakness, my big preference is we work it out with Iran. But if we don't work it out, bad things are going to happen to Iran.
Ben Domenech, what do you think he's saying? What do you think those B-2s mean?
What I think he's saying is that I think he's very bluntly sending the message with the presence of those B-2s of what he is willing to do. Look, we have a president who thinks of himself as being a peacemaker. He does not want to create new conflicts. In fact, I think he is, well in the camp of not wanting to leave any conflict behind when he eventually leaves this office. And because of that, I don't think he wants this scenario. But I think that he is also sending a message to Iran that if he has to do this, he is absolutely willing to pull the trigger. And that's something that they should hear, and they should hear it loud and clear, and they should take it seriously. And can I say one more thing about this?
Oh, please.
You said correctly that this is the most important story this week. I have been talking about this Signal Gate situation all week, and one of the things that sticks out to me about it is how, in the grand scheme of things, it is far less important than what is going on in the world right now. I mean, I get that Jeff Goldberg gets a couple good news cycles out of it, and that's something that entertains DC and it spawns memes and that sort of stuff. And that's fine, well and good. Mike Waltz made a mistake and he covered for his staff, in my view, because as everyone who's ever worked in a congressional office in the last 15 years, 20 years knows, your contacts are not managed by the member; they are managed by the staff. And so that's the thing that I think was sort of distracting folks from what's going on in the world right now. And from my perspective, that is a very significant development in terms of the willingness of this administration to very seriously entertain the possibility that they need to use those B-2s in the way that we both know that they can use them. And that's something that Iran should pay attention to and not take lightly, given the nature of this White House.
And as a matter of course, I always disclose Mike Waltz is a very good friend. My son works at the NSC. I always disclose that when it comes up.
I always forget that. But I will can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, I just can't comment on it, but go ahead.
The people coming after Mike Waltz, they're not coming after him because of this. They're coming after him because they disagree with his ideology about American policy and about American power projection, and it's completely unfair and duplicitous, and they're pretending that it's about something that it isn't about. And that's something that I have observed. I think you probably have observed it too, and it's something that everyone who is an intelligent viewer of politics should understand. They're not going after him for the thing that they actually want to go after him for, which is a disagreement that is policy-based, ideology-based, and where Mike Waltz is in the right and they're in the wrong.
I would direct everyone to what Vice President Vance had to say about it today at Greenland. I'm not going to comment on it for the reason I just stated, but I would direct everyone there. I can, however, get your comment on Vice President Vance in Greenland today, cut number 18.
I think a lot of Americans wonder, why does Greenland matter so much? Why does the mission of this base matter so much to the American people? And I learned a lot about that today myself. Of course, you can read about it in a book, but I saw it up close and personal. And if, God forbid, to my fellow Americans, if a missile was fired from an enemy country or an enemy submarine into the United States, it is the people here before us who would give notice to our brave men and women further south in the United States to let people know what was coming and, God willing, to try to shoot it down and prepare for it. That's one of the things that we do at installations like this. We know that Russia and China and other nations are taking an extraordinary interest in Arctic passageways and Arctic naval routes, and indeed in the minerals of the Arctic territories. We need to ensure that America is leading in the Arctic, because we know that if America doesn't, other nations will fill the gap where we fall behind.
So Ben Domenech, I want to give you enough time to talk about this. The Panama Canal, the Canada baiting, and the Greenland focus is of a piece about Cold War 2.0 with China, and to a certain extent their minor partner, Russia, North Korea, Iran. And I'm glad to see them talking about this. I really am. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm glad they're talking.
There's a reason that James Polk's portrait is back in the White House. I mean, this is an awareness of the need to defend our hemisphere, the need to understand America's position in a world where things, have frankly shaken up post-pandemic in lots of ways that we don't like. And everything the vice president said there, I think, is correct. We need to have an agreement with Greenland, whether it looks like something that involves a security agreement where we are ready to stand at its defense, where there's an understanding of partnership and along those lines, or whether it's something more significant, as the president has teased. This is all the more important given the way that things are shifting within the Arctic and the way that China and Russia are using their own tools to project power there and to potentially gather minerals and resources there that we should be, by all rights, pursuing as Americans in this moment.
So my last question, another bad week for the market. I don't really care because I invest for the long term and I assume the tax cuts will get passed and the market will rebound. But are you worried at all that this tax bill won't get through? Because they sure are taking their time.
They really are. And I think that it's unfortunate that we have had the number of stumbles early on Capitol Hill that I think Republicans have experienced, including things that I think that could have been easily anticipated. I share your view of this, and I too am a long-term investor, but it's one of these things where, people are jittery for a reason, and it's very important, especially for Republicans who are going to be, essentially starting their campaigns 6 months from now to run for re-election in the midterms, to get things right. And that, to me, includes, this tax bill, and it also includes, having a very clear message going into the fall that comes out both in the Virginia elections and flows into the next year's midterm.
Very last. I'm very grateful to Elise Stefanik, who I do not know. I think she's been a guest on my show once. Oh, my
gosh. Hugh, she got the short end. That is just so unfair to her. She's a very nice lady. I mean, I don't know her well, but it's, she certainly has been a loyal soldier and done everything that this administration, wanted her to do. And it's just, I think it's a real botch.
But it's patriotic on her part to step up and say, because she would love being the UN ambassador. She would love and she would kill it.
Of course, it's a career-making role. We've seen so many people emerge from it. But I think that she understands in this moment what's needed of her. I just hope that they have the virtue of giving her the kind of respect and things that she needs on the other end of this, because it was deeply unfair the way that this played out.
I agree completely. Ben Domenech, always a pleasure. You have a great weekend going to the Nationals. Didn't realize you were that. You're the Charles Krauthammer of the next generation.
I'm going from the Nats game to the Caps game on Sunday.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm sorry that your Washington team's going to get crushed by the Cavs. They're going to be a Cavalanche, Ben, a Cavalanche. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.